I come from both a jazz and classical background. My parents were classical musicians, so I grew up with all that, played the piano and the cello. And then I got into jazz. I was a professional jazz pianist for many years. There are different ways to approach making music. A classical approach, a jazz approach, and each of them have their own strengths, their own qualities, their own issues. And I'm just fascinated by the intersection between those two worlds. In terms of events, it can be anything from a very large-scale event with a full-size symphony orchestra that I would conduct, and it's immersive, and we have people seated within the orchestra to get a sense of what that feels like, to the other side, which is to be listening very close to a high-level jazz band and just think about how they make music together and how it's different from being part of an orchestra. Well, certainly communication. Communication between the musicians, communicating with the audience, with the leadership, the conductor, an ability to listen, and listen not only to your co-musicians or colleagues, but also to yourself. And that's not so easy when you've got a lot going on around you. So listening for sure. Trust is so important. Just feeling you can trust the musicians around you to deliver their part, I think, is also very clearly expressed in a musical environment. Collaboration, and I like to stress that the musicians in an orchestra are not competing with each other, but very much collaborating around a common vision, if you like, and a shared sense of purpose. And then there are all these other things as well. Non-verbal communication. If you observe the conductor of an orchestra, how are they able to impact on the way people feel and transform an ordinary performance into an extraordinary performance? As you can see, so many things. Preparation as well, collaboration, listening, trust, non-verbal communication. And music, of course, is extremely diverse, so there are so many different messages that come out of it. I cannot tell you how impactful it is to come out of a conference environment where it's been very technical and very business-driven, and you're suddenly listening to the sound of a symphony. I mean, this is just amazing. And from that place, it's a gradual process of showing how our two worlds are similar. This need to listen, to collaborate, the different perspectives you get from being within the orchestra is very significant. And just encouraging people to think of themselves as musicians, think of themselves as artists, and then reflect on what that might mean for them. There's so much creativity in anything that we do. I mean, the choices that you make. I mean, let's take an example. Imagine you're playing a classical piece of music. That music was written maybe a few hundred years ago, but there are so many ways to interpret that message. What does it mean for you? How do you want to convey what this message is about? And I think the same can happen within a work environment. You might have something which is quite clear that you need to achieve and to do, but you have so many choices about how you're going to deliver it. In a way, I think that's an artistic way of thinking about it, isn't it? To be able to stand up with a baton, wave this little stick around and move one's gaze and eyes and somehow have an effect on up to 100 musicians is an extraordinary thing. And of course, it is interesting to people who are interested in leadership, how to have a real impact when doing too much has a negative impact on your team, when you need to do that little bit more, when you need to stand back, having a sense of the big picture, where you need to be anticipating the future while listening to the present. There's so many things which are very complex and subtle, but I think at the highest level of leadership, As we race towards this new world, or at least we're in a state of anxiety about quite what the new world is going to be about, we do need to be reminded of our common humanity, creativity, just shared experiences that are a very, on a sort of human scale, should we say. In fact, even though you might be talking about a lot of other things, I think just to balance it with something to do with, if you like, our common humanity, I think is a really smart thing to do. The most important metaphors for now are increasingly artistic, and they are around the need for collaboration, for celebrating our common humanity, as we've already said, a certain degree of humility, obviously the diversity and inclusion, which is so crucial and important. And I think just to think of ourselves again as artists and think about what that means, and this need to collaborate and to share and to listen and to trust, see what comes out of that, I think is very, very powerful and relevant. If I was given an hour, I would probably spend the first 30 minutes just talking about the orchestra, all the different instruments, the different roles and functions, the need to listen to yourself and to each other, and the importance of trust across the orchestra. And then to think about the role of the conductor as someone who is influencing the choices being made by the musicians, just trying to bring something magical to really elevate the quality of the performance. And then for the second 30 minutes to just think about the world of jazz. The wonderful thing about jazz, it's about how do people really thrive in a turbulent environment. The need to be able to improvise, adjust your performance very quickly depending on who you're playing with. And the jazz environment and the jazz metaphor, I think, is a perfect way of just thinking about how to be effective in a turbulent working environment.